bodies. So just in case you don't know much information about these, so Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Housing Queensland is a non-government peak body that works together with members and partners to eliminate the disparities of housing experienced by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Queensland. Community Housing Industry Association Queensland is an independent industry body representing community housing organisations here in Queensland, and Q Shelter, which is hosting this session. So we are a peak body in Queensland working to influence solutions to housing needs and homelessness across an array of influence and sector support mechanisms. Thank you. So for today's session, I'll hand over in a moment to our program manager, Alana Kanafa, who I'm sure you all know by now. And Alana will be providing us with a bit of an update on the program as well as a few other things. And then we are really lucky today to be able to hear from Sam Betros, General Manager of Housing Development with the Department of Housing, Local Government, Planning and Public Works. And then as Alana mentioned, for those that joined us earlier on, we'll then hear from Jackson Hills, who's our Manager of Policy and Strategic Engagement, which I know is a real key passion area of his. So it'll be great to hear from him too. So with that said, that's enough from me. Alana, happy to kind of jump over to you now and kick it off.
Thank you, Murray. Great introduction. My name's Alana Kanafa. I'm the manager of the Community Housing Futures program. So I'll give a bit of an update on the Community Housing Futures program, then we can jump straight into those guest speakers. So round 2 of the business advisory grants closed in February and they've now been awarded. So we've now approved over $2.2 million worth of grants for community housing providers for growth related activities. We're currently in discussions with state government about a potential iteration 2 of the Community Housing Futures program. Obviously, nothing has been confirmed at this stage, but if and when we do get any kind of confirmation, we'll be really keen to engage with the broader industry on what iteration 2 could look like, just to make sure it's as meaningful as possible. We've already done a bit of pre-work in that space with our industry reference group and respective peak bodies as well. So we're also Community Housing Futures. Lots of you know we are partnering with AHURI in terms of measuring our impact. So AHURI are the program's evaluation partners. They're measuring the impact of the program throughout the life. And we're now, any day now, in fact, today or tomorrow, I'm expecting the first interim evaluation report from AHURI. So that's really pleasing to see. I'm really keen to share some of those insights in that report with the broader industry. And most definitely, if there is an iteration 2 of Community Housing Futures, that report will help shape what that could look like in terms of reflecting on what did and didn't work in this program and some of the highlights. So I look forward to sharing what that report has in it. Upcoming training and development. So we have UDIA is partnering with us to facilitate a finance and feasibility training for CHPs. It's on May the 9th. It is a comprehensive, I'm going to read this bit out because it's much more articulate than I could probably give it credit for. It's a comprehensive workshop to deep dive into the process of property development, feasibility and finance from community housing providers as perspective. So this session will aim to help you and your organisation navigate the complexities of project feasibility, site-specific project feasibility, and then financing specific projects and different models and what that could look like. So equipping you with the strategic insights and practical tools essential for growth success. And then in July, we have a 3-day property development masterclass, and that's going to be on the 24th to the 26th of July. And this one is actually taking a much broader look at the whole development life cycle. So from analysing your portfolio all the way through to project delivery and project handover. So more details on that one to come. That 3-day masterclass is also going to be quite subsidised by the CHF program. So it's a really, really exciting piece of work. And it also includes a bit of pre-learning, 3-day masterclass, obviously, but also a toolkit to take back to your organisation and embed that into your development process. And it also includes a 1-year property council membership for all attendees. So we'll make sure that we'll let the sector know when that's live and able to be registered for. So that's really it from me in terms of the Community Housing Futures program. And I don't want to take up too much time, but was there any questions about the Community Housing Futures program at all, or where it's at? So I'll just pause for a moment. Okay.
everyone, or if anybody's got any questions, they can pop it in the chat, Alana, as we go, and we can loop back to it towards the end. So
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, I will hand over to our first guest speaker, which is Sam Betros, General Manager of Housing Development, Department of Housing, Local Government Planning and Public Works. Sam is also on our governance committee for the Community Housing Futures Program and is a very, very valued member of that committee. Thank you very much for your time today, Sam. You're always extremely generous with your time for us, and we really, really appreciate it. So I'll stop sharing just so you can.
Oh, you made that sound so simple, Alana, so I can share my screen. That's great. We'll
Off
see
you
how we go.
go.
Yeah, and I'm just going to vamp while I work out how to do that. So, hello, everyone. As Alana gracefully said, I'm Sam Betros. I'm the General Manager of Housing Development, part of the Social and Affordable Housing Growth Division within the Department of Housing plus, plus, plus. And well done, Alana. You read all the proper parts of that properly. I'm wondering, I'm not a Zoom person, I'm a Teams person, and it's a different language. I know. Can everyone see that? Am I doing it right?
Perfect. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
we've got it.
Okay, that's great. So one of the pieces of work that my team's been responsible for is helping pull together a consolidated bid for in response to Housing Australia's recent round one call for applications under the Housing Australia Future Fund facility, what we're calling the Team Queensland bid. And we thought it might be useful to give a bit of a quick briefing as to what makes up the Team Queensland bid, to try and give a little bit more flavour as to the reason for pulling together what we're calling the Team Queensland bid, what it is and what it isn't, and what next for that process and for the sector more generally. I'm assuming everyone knows what the HAF is and what round one is, but if anyone has any questions, I can't actually see any hands or things. So if anyone could just jump in with a question or wait till the end, that'd be awesome. So what was the purpose and objective of putting together a Team Queensland bid? When in following our discussions with Housing Australia, we obviously have regular and frequent conversations with them around how they're administering their fund for the benefit of the system across the country, but particular for Queensland. We felt it important to pull together an approach that helped ensure Queensland was best placed to secure its fair share of funding available under the Housing Australia Future Fund. I think people on this call who have been working in the sector longer than I have know that in past programs, in past settings, Queensland may not necessarily have been the beneficiary of its fair share for various reasons. It might have been because of approaches taken by the Commonwealth, but it might also have been the way we were engaging with them through their various funding processes. So we wanted to take every reasonable step to make sure that when this program rolled around, that we were in the best position to make sure we were securing not the minimum available funding. And we know that under the Housing Australia Future Fund investment mandate, there are minimum thresholds for each jurisdiction. We wanted to make sure that while that was a given, we were positioning ourselves to get our fair share of the funding available for the HAF. Obviously, I can't speak to specifics about the Team Queensland bid. It's confidential because of the nature of the process with the Commonwealth. But what I did want to talk through is the types of projects that we've included and our strategy for including those types of projects as part of the HAF process. So when we were considering our approach to pulling together a Team Queensland bid and what projects we would consider including in that, we were really focusing on a number of criteria. The first two, hopefully self-evident, but obviously important, true north for us when we're putting together a suite of projects for Housing Australia's considerations. We wanted the projects that we were putting forward to be able to achieve Housing Australia's program objectives. So we didn't want to obviously put forward anything that was conflicting or not in the scope of the HAF. There's a range of housing initiatives that we deliver that don't necessarily suit the HAF, and there's no point including those in this particular call for applications. And anything we put forward, we always tested that from our assessment, our own self-assessment process, we believe they were capable of being assessed highly against the criteria that Housing Australia established for that round one call for application. So that was an important truth for us to always be able to come back to. The next 2 points are related and goes to the heart of, I think, the strategy that we underpinned the Team Queensland bid is projects put forward in that Team Queensland proposal are not currently part of any existing state-funded project, and it's not currently part of a state-led strategy to deliver against any other established target or program that the state has in place. Now, we know there was an opportunity to, for example, substitute out existing state funding and replace it, or propose the replacement of that funding with Commonwealth funding. That's probably would allow us to put projects that are really close to delivery into our Team Queensland bid, and would probably have satisfied a number of Housing Australia's program objectives around speed to construction and speed to delivery. But our view was we wanted the Housing Australia Future Fund contribution to Queensland to represent genuine additionality into the system, and so we felt subbing in state funding, Commonwealth funding in for state funding didn't necessarily represent genuine additionality, even if it would have obviously created a second string benefit through that freeing up and availability of state funding. We wanted the HAF projects to be specifically creating genuine additionality to the system. So anything you will have seen that is committed and funded is not included in this. These are projects that are on our forward pipeline. We obviously have a huge portfolio of projects under consideration, not all currently funded, not all being delivered today, but if successful through the HAF, we'll be able to be accelerated through our long-term pipeline planning and be delivered quicker and genuinely in addition to the program of significant capital delivery we're already undertaking. The final point there around the things we were looking for when it came to projects was we wanted it to contribute positively to the Queensland housing system and responded to a demonstrated need. Now, we're of the unfortunate situation that it's pretty easy to demonstrate need across every product type, jurisdiction and region. But it was, again, similar to those first 2 points, an important true north back to us that whilst we could be putting forward a whole range of projects that might be well aligned with Housing Australia's program objectives and met those other criteria, how is it best, where are we going to get the most meaningful contribution to our housing system through that HAF investment? And that could be our range of things in terms of regional spread, in terms of product type, in terms of target cohort. So it was important for us to always make sure that we were thinking about the broader system, not just what's the best way to get a successful, easy, low-hanging fruit project across the line. Obviously, we hope to do both of those things, but making sure that we were addressing that need and getting the most bang for the buck when it comes was important for us. A couple of other factors I just wanted to spend a bit of time talking about when I talk about the Team Queensland bid, and this is the end of my presentation, so I'm sorry I haven't been able to share any project specifics, but again, trying to give a sense of the flavour of our approach and strategy is to be clear, the Team Queensland bid only includes projects where the state is the sponsor for the project. The state has a key role in delivering or arranging the project and is making a form of co-contribution or is offering that co-contribution to the Commonwealth. It's not intended to capture all projects delivered in Queensland and doesn't make any representations to that effect. These are the ones where the state has secured support from executive government to make a representation to the Commonwealth around support for and our role in delivering, in partnership with the community housing sector, these projects. So for that reason, we're comfortable that something we were really conscious of and we wanted to make sure we were comfortable with was that we weren't competing or distracting from the community housing provider sector's ability to put in for HAF. If we successfully secure a fair share of HAF funding without any of the Team Queensland bid projects being approved, we'd be delighted with that outcome. We're not seeking to prioritise or progress Team Queensland state facilitated projects in priority to the CHP-led projects or other sectoral proposals. This is really about making sure that there is a smorgasbord of options available to Housing Australia to make it as easily as possible to invest how they want in the way that meets their criteria in our state. And if that's Team Queensland bid, great. If it's community housing provider sector led, great as well. And to that point, to be sure we're compliant with Housing Australia, but also a key requirement of ours was all of the projects that are included in the Team Queensland bid, despite them being that state sponsorship contribution and role in delivering, has CHP involvement. So we recognise the importance of the growth of the CHP sector to HAF's agenda and to our agenda, and felt that it was important to have that the case. For those who might be on the call who are worried they've missed the boat or weren't involved in that, for the significant majority of the projects included in the Team Queensland HAF bid, the CHPs have not yet been identified, and theory being as soon as we secure HAF funding, if we were to be successful through that Team Queensland process, we would then be able to use that funding support to run a procurement process to appoint that CHP through that to that future market process. And that CHP would, for the great majority of the projects in that Team Queensland bid, be the ultimate recipient of the HAF availability payment or concessional loans. So, as I said, for the significant majority, it is the CHP that receives the benefit of the HAF. The state's role is a facilitator and deliverer and co-contributor to that project. And finally, because targets, whilst often are a distraction, are also an important true north for us, is any social housing delivered through the Team Queensland bid counts towards as part of our strategy to achieve the ambitious social homes target set out in Homes for Queensland of 53,500. So Team Queensland bid is an important component to help us make sure that that target can be achieved, and anything delivered in part of that is part of our overall program to get to that 53,500. That's it for my pre-prepared slides. I'm going to try and work out how to stop sharing my screen now, which might be...
That's great, Sam.
There we go.
Thank you very much. There's some information there that I wasn't aware of, so that's really helpful. I'm really pleased to hear that it's additional, it's genuine additionality, and also that every project will have a CHP involved. Jackson, you popped a question in the chat. Did you want to read it out?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Sam. Great presentation, and really timely, I think, for where particularly everyone on this call is at with their planning. I think you sort of in part answered it. So I put another one in there too, Alana, but I'll just ask it anyway. So could you talk about hypothetically about how projects would flow if all or part of the bid was successful? So I think you touched on this. For example, if the subsidy is secured via HAF, how do the CHPs link into projects from a process point of view? Would that be a site-by-site based process, for example?
So for each of the things included in the Team Queensland, but each of the projects, there might be ones that are single site, there might be multi-site pipeline projects, there might be a range of different projects. I think how we go through appointing a community housing provider to partner with that, and what that role is we're looking for a CHP will be project by project dependent. But our view is that those sort of downstream procurement process through the CHP would follow hopefully very quickly after the confirmation of the funding support from Housing Australia. And as I said, the CHP would ultimately be the beneficiary of it. What that process looks like, I can't give you any sort of certainty about, because it would be different for each type of project. But we'd be looking to sort of take the lessons learned from all our other procurement activities. We're doing everything we can to make sure that those procurement activities are targeted, that they're lean, that they're efficient, but they also do the best to make sure we're partnering the right CHP with the right capability and capacity with the right projects.
That's great. And Jackson, you had one more question, which was actually one of mine as well. Sam, is it fair to suggest that the projects you've taken forward are based on the land identified through the state land order, or the recent land order, or is it additional to that as well?
Some were captured through that land audit, not all. We obviously have a significant pipeline of projects. Land audit has helped crystallise some of those opportunities, and where they suited really well to those other criteria that we talked about. That's great. There's obviously a range of projects coming out of the land audit that we're already out talking about at the moment, and so how that leads to that genuine additionality or not. The work the state does in identifying its and other land ownings that might be suitable for housing development didn't end with the land audit. The land audit is a piece of work that was undertaken and complete, and has informed a whole lot of work. But we didn't pick up sticks and stop looking for development opportunities. We continue to do that across our own sector, across our partners in government, and in the market more generally, to identify those opportunities. So, look, I think that land audit site has informed that process, but it's not an exclusive thing.
It was also pleasing to hear in your presentation that some projects that will go into that bid or have gone into that bid are regionally located as well, which I think was some of the questions that we did have from some of the CHPs. Was there any other questions for Sam? We'll open it to the floor.
So, because of the rising...
We can't let him get away in under half an hour. Come on, Mark Ferrari from Churches of Christ. You've got to have a question there, surely. No. Well, I'll just ask one, Sam. Do you have a view? Does the state government have a view whether other states have approached the program in this way? Do you happen to know? Because what we have heard as a sector is there's a big market response to round one, right? I think most people on the call have probably heard that. So, do you happen to know whether other states have moved in this way, states or territories?
Don't know for sure, Jackson. I think each, as you know, each jurisdiction is slightly different in the way the government leads its social housing investment. Some have it delivered like we do as an agency, others through the support of semi-external arm's length organisations like Homes Victoria support the delivery of social housing in that jurisdiction. So it's difficult for us to get good visibility around that. But we continue to work with our interstate colleagues around strategy and approach. And again, we don't really see ourselves in competition with those other jurisdictions. We sort of want to make sure that we use the benefit of us all coming around the table to advocate to the Commonwealth about how best to make investment in the states and the best way to interact. Obviously, we want to make sure we get our fair share, and that might mean others don't get what they think of their fair share. That's where the competition bit comes in, and we've tried to do our best to put our best foot forward with that bid, but couldn't speak with certainty around what other states are doing in that space.
Thank you. Sunil's put through a question, and it's around labour and material shortages within the supply chain of construction. Has there been any consideration into this in terms of prefabrication construction? Or it's not something that's being considered at this stage?
It is 100% being considered. I'm trying to think about how it was specifically addressed in any of our Team Queensland proposals. I don't think we specifically addressed that particular issue other than talking about general risk allocation and approach to construction management in the current climate. And we know that the Housing Australia call for applications and framework set out a whole range of obligations in terms of construction quality standard that align with the Commonwealth expectations. But we don't see any of that being prohibitive towards off-site manufacturing or modern methods of construction. But I think that'd be something we'd be keen for most of our projects to work through with the proponent about what's the right construction methodology for those projects and what's the best way to deliver it. Obviously, we're pursuing a fairly aggressive agenda in terms of MMC type projects and looking at how to make sure we're leveraging the state's growing capability in that space to deliver more quickly and more efficiently to areas that are particularly being impacted by those issues. So I'm not sure I addressed your issues. Generally, we talk a lot about how social housing systems dealing with that prefabrication as a strategy to deal with that disruption. But I think the HAF bid specifically didn't call it out as a particular area of focus.
Yeah. We've got a question from Sue. Hi, Sam. This is a little off topic, but I have a question. It's in relation to the recent changes to the SHDG. And is there someone in department that I can contact to talk about these changes?
Yes, there is someone. Would it be easier, Alana, if I provided your contact details outside of this to provide as part of the minutes? So yes, happy to provide that details. Always happy for the team to come and talk about those design guidelines and feedback from the market on that. Absolutely.
Yeah, great, Sam. And if anyone has any questions that they think of after this session, just email them through to the team here. We're happy to kind of feed them through to Sam.
I saw Tom's asked a question, Alana, around social and affordable.
Oh, sorry, Tom, I completely missed you.
No. So look, I think being the system administrator, social housing is obviously a priority for us. But HAF also provides us a unique opportunity to think about how we might be able to deliver mixed tenure in our developments. Obviously, our core business is delivering those social homes, and the 53,500 headline target that we talk about is social. But we've got broader obligations across government to deliver under the Accord and under things like shaping SEQ, similarly ambitious targets around affordability. So HAF does provide us an opportunity to seek support for an affordable product. And depending again on the project and the nature of that project, they may include social, they may include very special, a target sub-cohort of social, some included affordable, some were social only. Again, it's a really project-specific issue, but I had an opportunity to do a range of different things in the bid.
Great, thank you. If there's no other questions, I'll leave it there and invite anyone to send through any questions that you have or you think of later to me or Murray here in the team. Thank you very much for your time, Sam. That's been really, really insightful today, and I really appreciate it. I'm sure others
No
do
problem.
too.
I'll hang around because I'm always interested in what Jackson has to say. So I'll
Did he
loiter in the
bribe you to
background.
say that? No.
Yes. Yeah, he did.
Oh,
That's all right.
I better take that slide out of the back.
Yeah. That's the real reason I'm hanging around. But anyway,
Yeah.
thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sam. I'll just... So we'll now hear from Jackson Hills, who's our Policy and Strategic Engagement Manager here at Q Shelter, another person who is extremely generous with their time for the community housing sector and broader industry. Jackson's going to give us some insights on recent local government elections and opportunities for the housing and homeless sector. So over to you, Jackson, to gracefully share your screen.
I'm going to see if I can be as successful with that as Sam was. So I too am a little bit more au fait with Teams. That's not coming up yet.
We can see the like the editor mode, but not the actual.
Okay, hold on a tick.
If not, I can share mine because I
How
think you
about
sent
now?
them to. Oh yeah, perfect.
Terrific. Okay. Well, look, thanks to Sam for that contribution, and I'm sure many of you mainly came along for that, but which was really useful, Sam. So thank you again. Alana and Murray just asked me to join you just to fill out the session with maybe a bit of an update on the recent local government elections. And I guess how we've interpreted some of the outcomes and maybe some information that you may or may not be aware of. Some of you are probably quite extensively involved in that in your local community, and others might not be. So just give you a broad brush snapshot, maybe I think probably Alana 15 minutes, I think, and some questions at the end. But I too, like Sam, can't see other faces on the screen. So I'm just going to rely on you, Alana and Murray, to let me know if anyone wants to dive in. So I guess the first thing, it feels like a while ago now, that we held the local council elections here in Queensland across all 77 local government authorities. The election day was the 16th of March, but as you probably know, there's a 2-week period of early voting leading into the election day. What was really interesting with that election too was that there were 2 state by-elections also happening on the same day in those locations. So one in Inala and one in Ipswich West, which I'll come back to a little bit later on. So people in those locations had to vote twice. Those of you that aren't aware, local government elections use the optional preferential voting system here in Queensland. And that's often, up to some sort of debate and discourse, but that's the system that we use at the moment. So if anyone followed the how to vote cards around the traps, whether it be in Brisbane or in some of the other locations, you would have noticed that some candidates were asking people to vote one, and others were encouraging them to vote down the list. So it's an optional process at local government level. What really, I guess, took me by surprise is just how many people had sort of applied for or put their hand up to run for local council, whether it be in the mayoral races or for local council seats. I think it was 14, I got this off the ECQ website, 1422 candidates nominated for local government elections in 2024. So obviously some of those are incumbent mayors and councillors, but a lot of new candidates putting their name forward, and quite a lot of retiring mayors and councillors as well. So quite a lot of renewal in the local government elections this year. Some interesting sort of notable characters in addition to the usual kind of suspects running for local council. Steve Jackson, anyone who's a rugby league fan will know, was running up in Mackay. And also quite a lot of, or not quite a lot, a couple of federal MPs and also one state MP in particular moving into the local government space or seeking to. So George Christensen was running up in Mackay, Andrew Lammin in the Redlands, and also Jim Madden, who was actually the retiring state MP in Ipswich West, ran for council successfully as well. So just wanted to, I guess, cover off some of the engagement that we as an organisation on behalf of the sector had. And there was a number of you on the call that will have been involved in this in various ways, whether it be engaging with some of the candidates on some of the key issues in your area or the housing agenda more broadly. This is essentially what we did as a package of kind of engagement programs around the local council elections. We wrote to all mayors of the 77 LGAs well before the election was called, and as many of the councillors as we could. We had a policy platform that was very local government focused, just acknowledging that local government doesn't have the full remit for housing and homelessness response, as you all probably know, but certainly many more of them are leaning into that space, which we appreciate. And that policy platform broke out into sort of 3 areas that are very specific to local government focus. One being responding to homelessness, another being the planning levers they have control for, and another, a third one around innovation and partnership opportunities. We held a couple of candidate forums as well. They weren't your sort of politics in the pub style sessions. They were very educational. So they weren't debates. It was an opportunity for us to get new candidates across some of that content. So we held one for SEQ council candidates and then another one for regional candidates for obvious reasons. The issues can be different in those markets. We did a bunch of digital activity as well and some stuff around editorial around some of the key issues. And we also held a range of briefings with individual councillors and mayors and candidates on the way through. I guess the objective of that sort of engagement on behalf of the sector and anything else the sector was doing is to bring awareness to the role of local governments in the housing and homelessness agenda, what's happening across jurisdictions. Like 77 is a lot of jurisdictions, so there's obviously lots of best practice happening, and that's not to mention what's happening right across the country. And then also to look at how we can work more closely together in the future. So in terms of the results, some of you may have followed this. It took a bit of time to kind of get to the end of it, as those of us that live in Brisbane and other places would know. I think 4 weeks in the end all told until some of the final positions were declared. Across all of Queensland, there were 14 mayors that were just elected unopposed, so no kind of elections. One of those was actually Mayor Flannery in Moreton Bay. Then there were lots of new mayors elected, and I've mentioned some of those here on the page. Just having a look at the attendance for this session today, I just put a few in there that I thought might be interesting to this group. So new mayor in Logan, which is a massive population centre for us, is John Raven. Previous mayor has resigned out there, David Power. New mayor in Redland as well, because Karen Williams has also resigned, so that's Jocelyn Mitchell. New mayor up on the Sunshine Coast, who some of you may have seen on the TV screens up there, Ross Natali. And then in Noosa, Claire Stewart is actually running in the state election later this year. So another journalist, Frank Wilkie, was elected in Noosa. In regional Queensland, there were quite a few changes as well. In Bundaberg, Townsville, Cairns, South Burnett, Southern Downs and Mount Isa. And in some cases, they were retiring mayors, but in other cases, they were mayors that were defeated by either existing councillors or new candidates. Townsville, in particular, was an interesting one, a really tight race, and I think a little bit of a surprising result in Cairns as well, with Amy Eden, who's been on the council there for a while, defeating the incumbent mayor Terry James. So I'll keep moving. I thought we could also just, again, looking at who was on the call, just kind of unpack Brisbane a little bit too. So there's lots of talk around the Brisbane local government election in the lead up, how many seats the Greens, or sorry, how many wards the Greens might win, for example, how much of the vote the LNP would get or Labor would get. Here's a little bit of a summary. So obviously you would know that Adrian Schrinner was re-elected as mayor. The LNP did retain the majority of the seats that they had. In that race for mayor, there were 3 key candidates and 2 other candidates as well running, and that's the split of the vote. So he achieved about 47% of the primary, and then that's how it broke out across Labor and the Greens. The Greens vote did increase as a percentage, though, across Brisbane, which is really interesting for us in the housing and homelessness space to kind of follow, and I'd encourage you to follow that in the lead up to the state election later this year. And I've got a breakdown of what that means in a moment, what it might mean in terms of the state seats too. But generally, the Greens vote increased as a result of Labor's vote increasing a little bit in each of those locations. It's what the numbers are showing. And the primary vote in about 10 wards, I think the Greens have actually beat Labor out in 10 wards, even though they only picked up two seats. So one they already had and a new seat. So they certainly did sort of make some headway in terms of their margin. And then the only other observation I'd make about Brisbane, it did seem, and we met with all the mayoral candidates in particular as a sector lead, it did seem that Labor seemed to focus a little bit more on the outer city ring. And I don't know, that could have been potentially one of the reasons why there was a bit of slip in some of the inner city areas. But yeah, that's a broad statement to make. This, I think, is interesting. It's something that we're kind of trying to understand a little bit more. And even though the Greens didn't win more wards at the local council level, I think they're quite vocally saying that they're targeting, 8 to 10 seats in Brisbane in particular in the lead up to the state election. And we've done a little bit of analysis here. We'll do some more. But what this table's showing you is a couple of key wards in the 2024 Brisbane Council election. The overlapping state seat doesn't perfectly overlap, but it's the overlapping state seat, and also which party, by the way. And then the third column shows the swing against sort of the incumbent there towards the Greens in the council election. And then probably the fifth one's most interesting to me. These seats have a really high proportion of renters, so way higher than most other seats around the state, as you would expect in inner city areas. But just looking at Central in particular, I mean, obviously there's a huge amount of renters in that location. And I guess the reason I point that out is that in terms of housing policy in particular, more than homeless policy, housing policy, the Greens seem to be leaning mostly into housing affordability and the rental market and what can be done there. So I just think this is an interesting space for us to kind of follow as we get closer to October. Obviously, the government, I'm not just saying this because Sam's here, obviously the government has announced its really ambitious and extensive Homes for Queenslanders plan earlier in the year. One of 4 central areas is around the rental market and support for renters, particularly vulnerable renters. And also going through the parliament at the moment are further protections for renters. So you can already see by that response that, this is a key focus area, I think, for all the parties leading into October, as it should be. And then the last thing I thought I'd do, Alana, and again, I can't see the questions in the chat, so I might just have to deal with those at the end. We like this little graph from Ahuri. It's just a great way of looking at policy levers. I reckon local government's getting off a bit light, actually, in this one, but they've packaged a few things up together there. But it's a great way of kind of looking at who has the role for what. And I think even Sam would agree, if he's still here, I can't see if he is, but there's an overlap in some of these functions. And for good reason. Like, it was probably even clearer 10 years ago, the lines of demarcation. But obviously, if you look at some of the subsidy programs and funding and the planning levers, there's starting to be more of a blend of the roles and perhaps, hopefully a bit more of a working together across those 3 streams in areas that make a lot of sense. But I think this is a really helpful one. So as part of the post-event pack, Alana, I think we'll provide that. And looking at those functions of local government at the bottom there, you'll notice that they align really neatly with what our policy platform was really focused on in the lead up to the local government elections. So that's also everything I had too, Alana. So hopefully that was a little bit insightful or helpful, and happy to answer any questions anyone's got.
Thank you. There's not any in the chat at this stage, but I've got a question while I wait for others to ask a question. I guess what's the opportunity? So if you're a CHP and you have an incumbent council, what's the opportunity there?
Well, there's a few ways to answer that. One thing I would say is, let's look to where there's been some really good best practice with partnerships. So we often go to Moreton Bay because they've been tinkering around with the planning levers and infrastructure charges in their location. I think we still need to kind of evaluate that eventually and go, is that really moving the dial? Like, we know a couple of projects have gone to Moreton Bay because of that. But I think it's too soon to tell whether that's the magic sauce that kind of makes it really work. What it did do for me, from our perspective, is it was Moreton Bay switching the light on, saying we're open for business when it comes to community housing. Come to us. We want to attract this investment from either the state or the federal government. And I know when we talk to other local governments, we say, well, what's your response to that opportunity at the moment? Because this funding and subsidy may only be here for the next 5 years. So I think we're really trying to, profile those best practice examples, Alana. So that would be one. There's also others. Regional examples would be some of the regional councils that have had old housing stock, for example, that they're trying to dispose of that might be in a certain condition. They're really actively working with the state, who has an interest in those sites, but also looking to partner up with CHPs to maybe take those assets on, which could really help build capacity locally in those cases. And then in the case of places like the Gold Coast, and some of these really high growth areas, I think what they really need to be doing, and as you know, we're having some active conversations with them at the moment, is where do you want this type of housing based on your city plan? I mean, the city's getting so big quickly, we need to preserve some locations for this in the inner city urban areas through that form of infill housing and other types of development. So we actually need them to help us map a pathway through that. I mean, that's all in the local government space without talking about state and federal.
Thank you. Jonathan's asked a question. What was the response from council candidates to your platform? Where was the most enthusiasm?
Yeah, I think the thing to recognise with elections is candidates in particular are always really keen to engage with content. I think content that, is kind of framed around trying to help people. So I think generally speaking, there was some positivity around, this is a worthwhile set of initiatives. We need to do more in this space. Local government's got a role to play. That was some of the general kind of views. But I think where we engaged with some existing kind of incumbents that have been in local government for a long time, it was like, well, how does that fit in with our existing set of kind of programs and initiatives, and where can we improve? So those conversations were probably a little bit more targeted and have led to some ongoing conversations now after the election, which was good. But I would say that in most cases, particularly in SEQ, we had a really good follow-up rate. So it was either responding to the correspondence we sent out or people seeking a meeting. And even those online sessions we held were really well attended. So I think in the SEQ case, we had about 50 different candidates there, maybe another 30 in the regional situation. You've got to remember, if you're a candidate, you really want to be out in the street, in the field. So to give up that time and come and engage with the content, I thought was a really good sign.
Thanks. Did anyone else have any other questions for Jackson?
Very good. Thanks for your time.
Well, likewise, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to email myself or Murray or even Jackson directly if you have his email address. I'm happy to take any questions after. I did have some questions come through for you, Sam, if you are still able to respond to a few.
Yep.
So we have Mark, from Churches. Did the Queensland team bid consider seeking CHP engagement prior to submission? And this comes from, I guess, when you make that decision around which sites you choose or engage with regionally, was there an opportunity to engage with CHPs beforehand, or did time not allow for it? What was the thinking behind that?
A couple of things. I think firstly, we engaged with the peaks, so reached out and walked through with Q Shelter, Chia, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders around the strategy, housing around the strategy and the approach prior to putting in the bid, and just tested that through the peaks. So that was a consultation we elected to do, and the reason for that was recognising we've got those downstream procurement processes to come for all of our projects. We didn't want to compromise the future integrity of those procurement processes by consulting or involving particular individual CHPs beforehand. So I really want to make sure that no one was advantaged or disadvantaged through that process, recognising that it's the first step to getting them on board. But having known that we did want to get that CHP sector involvement, we lent on the peaks to help us give that barometer check, I suppose, in terms of was the approach right. The expectation would be subject to funding success through the rounds. We then go and engage with the sector more broadly about each specific opportunity, which I think is probably more appropriate than talking about the general overall strategy, which again you saw from today. We can give a little bit of information, but I think that the very next question from CHP is where are the projects, how do I get involved? And we're just not ready to talk about that yet. We're also conscious to the time question that while we were submitting Team Queensland bids, so was every CHP, hopefully, in Queensland, doing similar on their bids. And we're probably at the same time also putting together high-quality submissions to Quick Starts Round 2. So wanted to make sure we were leaving people well alone to focus on those components and engage with when we had more certainty around those projects. But appreciate I'll take the feedback from Mark that sort of means probably would have welcomed a little bit more engagement and opportunity to do so. And I think that's valid feedback. It was hard to get that balance right.
Yeah, it is a hard balance, isn't it? Mark, were you happy with that? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. It's and that's what I mean. Initially, I was sort of thinking more of those regional areas where there's not many CHPs or providers out there like in that. So, whether that could help strengthen and attract more, that's all. But granted, you answered that well. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Sam. I think there was another question from Tom. Did most of the submissions value up?
So I think for us, it comes back to that criteria around was it capable of meeting Housing Australia's program objectives and criteria, and we obviously did our modelling and won't sort of share any information here, but believe they represented a value proposition to whoever the investor might be if it wasn't a value proposition, we'd would be questioning whether it was the right thing to do to include it in the project or not. I think, what does value up mean? It's probably another question, Tom. Like, I think everyone can sort of back solve the half and try and work out what they have available on a per dwelling basis. You could tie yourselves up in knots thinking around how they're going to distribute the funds to achieve their targets and doing that math. I think all we focused on was putting forward a range of proposals that we believe represent value for money, whether they represented an affordable outcome for half across its portfolio. That's for half to decide. But hopefully us, as much as anyone, has intelligence around what is a compelling value proposition in the market. We've run multiple competitive procurement processes through quick starts and HIF that show us what the market's capable of delivering, and we think we've got a really good understanding of what support is necessary to enable these projects to get over the line, and we're able to use that, our own benchmarking, to get ourselves comfortable that we weren't putting forward together to proposals that were out of the money. But the affordability question for the program is one that HUF's going to have to work through, I think.
Yeah, great points. Well, I might close out there if no one else has got any other questions. I just wanted to take the time to thank Sam and Jackson again for joining us, and thank you all for joining us today. I know it's really, really busy time, so we appreciate it. It's great to see you all.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.